If you've played Kuon before, there's no doubt that at least a few bosses stand out. But for the most horrifying and creepy, I have to hand it to the tragic and terrifying Lady Fujiwara. This week, we're going to dig a little into her history and the events that led to her becoming, well, an actual human centipede. Let's take a look. Lady Fujiwara is the wife of Lord Fujiwara, and the mother of Ayako and an unnamed son. It's Lord Fujiwara who summoned the exorcist Dolman to investigate the strange happenings at his mansion and kicked all of this mess off. Lord Fujiwara is also one of the first real boss battles in the game and is pretty creepy himself, although he has nothing on his wife. In fairly typical From Software fashion, the story of Lady Fujiwara and how she came to be in such a state when you encounter her is scattered throughout the game, mostly in files that you can pick up as you explore. It's not a pretty story, and it highlights an honourable woman and a protective mother that, in the end, was also unable to halt the tragedy that had already begun. In one of the inspection reports you can find in-game, it's revealed that by April 2nd, Gakis have taken over the manor. Lord Fujiwara is dead by this point, and one of the servants has taken on the task of protecting Lady Fujiwara and the children. 2 days later, the lady suggests they abandon the infested manor and take refuge in the temple. She's of the belief that the Gakis won't be able to enter the temple because it was built long ago, well before the manor, on powerful, miraculous ground. The following day, the servant agrees that, yes, it's probably a good time to abandon the increasingly hostile manor. But on the way to the temple, he loses sight of the lady. He's unsure of where she is, but he hopes that she arrived there safely without him. On this same day, Lady Fujiwara writes in her own diary, and here things get interesting. I have decided to take the other sick people with me to the temple. I dare not see Miyoshimaru or Ayako. I am no longer human. I cannot allow my children to witness their mother's flesh rotting. At some point between her husband's death and leaving for the temple on April 5th, Lady Fujiwara has taken ill with the disease as well. She knows that she's dying, just like the others, and makes the decision to avoid her children so that they don't see their mother's rotting flesh. She already knows that, like the other monsters infecting the manor, she too is no longer human now, but she still holds out hope that perhaps the temple can save her. It's important to note, however, that despite wanting to avoid her children, she still brings her youngest son along with her, perhaps fearing that he'll be in danger if left at the manor while others at the temple can care for him away from her. He's also not alone, as they take the servant boy, Miyoshimaru, with them. Around the same time, one of the priests writes in his own journal that Lady Fujiwara has departed the mansion for the temple with many sick people. I understand that Lady Fujiwara too has contracted the disease, but the sickness has not destroyed her human kindness. She reminds me of Confucius's saying about sacrificing one's life in an act of charity. I cannot help but admire her high sense of morality. The lady is highly respected for her kind, gentle manner and self-sacrificing nature. All are unaware of what's about to happen to her. On April 6th, the following day, the temple priest agrees to take the lady in. She orders Miyoshimaru to seal the temple gate behind them so that none can get in or out. By this point, several ill people have taken refuge at the temple, and the lady hopes that by containing them all, the disease, as they call it, will stop spreading. She sacrifices herself to save those still left, including her children, but before she leaves, she writes a note for Ayako, telling her that the manor is no longer safe and she's going to check if the temple is. If so, she'll signal her daughter with a bell, but until that point, she should lock herself in the cupboard and hide at any sign of danger. If 10 days pass and she hasn't returned, then Ayako is to gather the wooden discs and spikes left behind, and then proceed to the temple by herself. For several days, Lady Fujiwara takes a break from her diary. But then, on April 9th, she writes another small yet important entry. Today, I felt faint. Suddenly, I was inside a wicker chest. There were no silkworms in the chest, only a centipede. It's here that she first remarks on being a part of the Kuon ritual, although she herself has no idea what that is yet or even what's going on. The Kuon ritual is Dolman's attempt at resurrecting his dead daughter, although even he is unaware of its true purpose. I have a video on the Kuon ritual if you'd like to know more about that though, so I'll leave a link in the comments. So on April 9, Lady Fujiwara experiences the first step of the Kuon ritual. She's placed in a wicker chest, which usually holds silkworms, but this time with a centipede. At this point, Dolman is experimenting and unsure of what will happen exactly. And Lady Fujiwara is, in essence, one of his test subjects. She doesn't remember getting into the chest. She doesn't remember a whole lot. She has the disease that's spreading around the manor and she's dying. But it's here that things really start to break down. The next day, she remarks that her neck is throbbing with pain and her muscles are stiff and swollen. This is because of the ritual. She merged with the centipede in the wicker chest, and she, of course, is unaware of that. The day after that, she asks the priest for a room in the temple and she quarantines herself even further. She figures that if she stays away from people and rests, then the disease shouldn't progress any further, and she won't infect others. By April 14th, however, she realizes that she can't hold it in any longer. Whatever is happening to her, it's changing her. When she sees human flesh, she's overcome with an overwhelming desire to eat it. She's constantly hungry, and not for food. Her body seems to move of its own accord now, and she has little control over her thoughts and desires. Yet still, she remains alone in her room with no company but the cat. On April 17th, she remarks that she can hear a song, and when she does, her body aches, longing to chew flesh and drink blood. Yet, she still has some semblance of humanity left, as again, she states that she must stay away from her children, as she doesn't want to kill them. The following day, while patting the cat, she notes how soft it is, and how her children's skin must be even softer. Here, the last vestiges of her sanity are finally breaking down, and she can no longer resist the urge to eat flesh. The next day she passes out upon hearing the song, and again wakes up inside a wicker chest, this time with the cat next to her, dead. She feels somewhat rejuvenated and calm, but also remarks, "There's something inside me." On April 23rd, her son finally comes to see her. It has been several weeks since she locked herself in by this point, so he was undoubtedly worried. But having been through the wicker chests at least twice by this point, Lady Fujiwara is no longer herself, and she eats the boy. This is witnessed by the servant boy, Miyoshimaru, who also leaves a note about it. It's at this point that the lady's diary entries end. She's no longer human, having consumed her own son, and the desire to eat human flesh has taken over. News of the horrific monster she has become spreads quickly, and all fear her. One note, written on a yellow cloth scrap, is left behind as a warning. Lady Fujiwara will be here soon. She is no longer human. Go back, if you value your life. It's after all of this happens that we finally encounter Lady Fujiwara in the game. She only appears in the Yang phase, as you play as Sakuya. Lady Fujiwara kills Dolchin, one of the exorcists in training trying to deal with the mana infestation, and attempts to climb into a wicker chest with him. When Sakuya arrives to stop her, Lady Fujiwara undergoes a transformation and turns into a half-centipede, half-human creature. The behind-the-scenes art even refers to her at this point as Mukare Onna, or centipede woman. Her neck explodes and turns into the body of a centipede, whilst feelers extend out of her head and smaller creatures crawl out of her mouth. Her long reach can make her a pain to deal with, but in the end Sakuya prevails and, like the rest of her family, is finally defeated. And that marks the end of the tragedy of Lady Fujiwara. She's a fascinating character with an incredible amount of history and lore hidden throughout the game, and she's undoubtedly one of the most memorable and scary boss fights as well. They even somewhat recycled her design for the centipede monks in Sekiro 15 years later. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.